Today is Premier League launch day. This afternoon, Chief Executive Richard Masters sat down to preview the season ahead with our senior reporter, Geraint Hughes.
Richard, here we go again, but it's one here we go again. It's 30 years since the Premier League began. Can you just sort of sum up, I suppose, the influence the Premier League has had, but also what it's developed into, what it stands for?
Yeah, 30 years in a couple of weeks since that original game. Well, it's been an extraordinary journey, hasn't it? I've been lucky enough to be on for pretty much half of it, working at the Premier League. But you know, the game has been transformed really. And that's the entire game. So if you think about where English football was 30 years ago, I don't think we lag behind anymore. You know, the Premier League got fantastic football. I think got the best cohort of players and managers we've ever had. We've got competition throughout the league. We've got full stadia. We've got stadium projects popping up all over the country. It's a much safer, we've got problems, but it's a much safer and more inclusive place. And I think just from English football perspective, our national teams are all really competitive. Our teams are leading in Europe, and of course the Premier League plays a big role in the economic and social fabric of this country. So I think it's been transformed in the last 30 years, and we're really proud as well to fund different parts of the game in the communities in which football clubs exist all over the country.
I know it's going to be difficult, but can you maybe just sort of regale us maybe some of what you see as the highlights? That may be a great goal, that may be, you know, some of the work that the Premier League's been able to do.
Well, yeah, I mean, all of the things I've been talking about. I mean, for me, the memories are all of the sort of the incredibly tense final days. I've lived through a few of them, and they're fantastic. They're the things that stick in my memory. But there's too many to mention. The great thing about the Premier League is everyone will have their own favourite moments.
In terms of moving on to, you know, you mentioned that first answer, Richard. You know, it's a safe, inclusive place, but you know there are issues, there are problems you've got to deal with. You've been proactive in trying to get a message out about the behaviour of fans. We saw towards the back end of last season, especially across the Premier League and other leagues as well, the behaviour of fans, pyrotechnics, pitch invasions. How do you try and stop this?
Well, it was brilliant to welcome fans back properly last year and embrace them across the season. We did see a deterioration in fan behaviour, I think, from before the break, as we call it. And we're trying to take action, and that's not just us, it's also the FA and the EFL as well, so coordinated action across the game. And we're trying to communicate to fans and tell them that, you know, letting off smoke bombs or marine flares, invading the pitch is dangerous and it has consequences for people. We're more likely to see, I'm not saying it will stop, but hopefully over time we can push it back and eradicate it in the long term. But it'll have consequences for people. They will be banned from watching Premier League football matches and may incur a criminal record. So we need to get tough on it. I think it's a societal issue and it's coming into football, and we need to deal with it.
What kind of sanctions would you like to see? You say you've got to work, but you've got to work with your partners. You've got to work with the clubs. Got to work with the police, etc. What kind of sanction would you like to see? Well,
we're going to see significant football bans. But, you know, we're going to decide in September what those bans are going to be and how long they are, and whether there are different bans for different offences. And of course, we're going to work with the police. We don't want Premier League matches to be overly stewarded or overly policed. We want it to be a fantastic atmosphere where everyone can enjoy themselves. But at the moment, the balance isn't quite right. We need to adjust.
Lots of things you're trying to get sorted before the start of the season. Taking the knee, I believe, you know, the captains have had meetings. Maybe continue those meetings as well. But where will the Premier League go on where you go with that going forward?
Well, we'll support the players. I mean, 2 years ago, the players wanted to take action, wanted to take a stand really against racism, both within football and the wider society. Taking the knee has become part of the Premier League for the last 2 seasons. I think that the concerns expressed in the meeting that I was in were about it becoming the gesture itself losing power and momentum. And so I think we are going to do something different next season. We're not quite ready to announce it. But I think that the taking the knee will continue in some form, and hopefully we'll be able to announce that tomorrow or certainly before the season.
And again, I suppose whatever is announced, it's the collective way of the captains coming together, speaking to the players. It's a collective agreement.
It's the captains talking to their squads and collectively deciding what to do, supported by the Premier League and the clubs.
VAR, Richard. Some love it, some loathe it. I suppose, where do you stand on it? Where does it evolve for the Premier League as well? You know, there's the possibility of maybe decisions being explained, you know, post the match through some audio being released. What could happen there to make the experience, I suppose, the engagement between the fans more enjoyable and more understandable?
Well, VAR is there to perform a role. It's there to stop, the clear and obvious errors affecting the results of games, and to make the competition fairer, have greater integrity. And I think it's doing that. I think last year we had a good year in terms of the implementation of VAR. Some people will never be able to reconcile themselves with it, I guess. But I think that one of the things that we're going to be able to improve, we've got obviously some of our retiring referees taking up full-time roles, VAR coaches being put in place. So I think the system's going to improve. It went more into the background, and I think that's the right place for it. Only used when it's absolutely necessary, and only come in when there really are clear and obvious errors. So I think with every year of implementation it should improve. And I think in terms of communication, that is absolutely key. As you know, the IFAB rules prevent us from doing certain things. But in terms of listening to the VAR and the conversations they're having with referees, it's something we will look at and seeing whether that can be done sort of post-match or on a delayed basis. But we need to look at that and decide what the right thing to do is.
Because that sounds great on the face of it, but then again, it potentially brings referees under even more scrutiny and maybe under even more abuse.
Well, correct. So we need to talk to the referees about it. So it's a thought and something we're going to look at.